When you're stretching, you shouldn't be going after a destination. You should be going after a sensation or the ability to relax into that stretch and then feel those muscles just give. Welcome back to another PT Pro from the Optimal Body Podcast. I'm Dr. Dom.
I'm DocJen.
And today we're going to be talking about the 3 tips that can drastically improve your mobility. So stick around. All right, so when it comes to mobility, everyone just kind of thinks of sitting in these stretches forever, and that's what's going to make the difference for me. Well, we have these 3 tips that are going to be coming at you that I know many of you may not have thought of before to drastically improve your mobility. Before we dive in on that, of course, I'm going to ask you to please hit subscribe and that notification bell so that you're always in tune to what we're putting out, because along with these PT Pearls and podcast highlights, Jen comes out with incredible videos on movement, pain-related issues, different diagnoses. So get subscribed, hit that notification bell, and now we're going to dive into the tips on how to improve your mobility.
I think these 3 are really, really crucial because it is the continued, like I'm stretching, I'm foam rolling, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm seeing no changes.
Yeah, and I think there's just like the stereotypical get to the gym, touch your toes, pull your heel to your butt, do a couple of these quick stretches, and then jump on the treadmill or the elliptical, or get into your weights routine or your F45 class or whatever it may be. And so I think there's just a lot of misconceptions around stretching or mobility and what it actually means and what we should be focused on, or how to do it in a way that's actually beneficial to prep your body to do whatever movement you're about to do.
It's so funny, to see it does go on that spectrum where it's like you either barely tapping into any kind of stretching in your life, or you think that you have to do yoga and, really lay in positions for hours at a time to make any kind of difference. And we just want to kind of touch on how that's not necessarily true. And there's 3 specific things we're going to talk about. Obviously, there's more. There's always more. But I think if you were to touch on within your body these 3 things, it can start to make a really huge impact. And we'll just dive into number 1. Yeah. We're going to say that if you are not down regulating your system and practicing this on a regular basis, then your body is probably chronically going to feel tight, no matter how much you stretch or foam roll.
Yeah. And by down regulation, again, Jen mentioned, we've talked about things that can help you downregulate, or behaviors that are seen as downregulation, like breath work a ton. And we're more than anything referring to the nervous system and how so many of us spend our day in this fight or flight, this reactive state where our brain is tending to send out more inflammatory type hormones, more stress signals to our muscles, so they're going to be on guard and ready, rather than living into this parasympathetic portion of our system. And so we're going to give a few examples of what you can do to get into that parasympathetic system. And number 1, and the one we always talk about, is breath work and living into long exhales, breathing down into your low rib cage rather than breathing up into the chest and using those neck muscles. Breathing into the low rib cage and focusing on the exhale being slightly longer or significantly longer than the inhale.
If we could just take a little bit more intentional awareness, not only on a longer exhale, but maybe even starting to breathe in and out throughout our nose more, nasal breathing. This is huge, right? And there is this capacity to be limited in our ability to achieve these big inhales from our low rib cage if we don't have good rib cage mobility, if we don't have good thoracic mobility, upper back mobility, if we just haven't been taught and we're not aware of what this may look like, because a lot of people have traditionally thought diaphragmatic breathing to just be belly breathing. If I push my belly in and out, then I am diaphragmatic breathing, which we have talked about at length, but that's not necessarily true. So starting to get that mobility back within the low rib cage and the upper back is really crucial to help with down regulation practices.
Yeah, I think the great thing about the Grateful for My Body this year is you actually have breath practices in there that you demonstrate.
Yeah.
And so if people are wondering, often we'll just talk about this, or we'll talk about it during stretching. Just make sure you're using long exhales during your stretches. This time you actually have specific videos on breathwork, which is incredible because in reality, what we're doing with this long exhale is we're telling our system that it's safe. Often people will be seeing how much they can push into the end of a stretch. One of my favorite phrases is when you're stretching, you shouldn't be going after a destination, like touching the toes or getting a certain distance or laying down on the ground. You should be going after a sensation or the ability to relax into that stretch and then feel those muscles just give. Sometimes I've been working with patients or clients and said, okay, try exhaling over 10 seconds and all their air is out after 3 seconds. And they're like, I can't slow down anymore, right? And yes, if we've been breathing a certain way for a certain amount of time, it might be difficult to get back or to get into that practice, but it's kind of a positive feedback loop. And the more you train it, easier it will be. And then the faster you will grow in your ability to downregulate or use breath as a tool to impact your nervous system.
What else can help to downregulate my system?
So many different downregulatory or downregulation practices, looking at a sunrise or a sunset or looking at the horizon in general and allowing our vision not to be focused on one thing, which is very sympathetic if we're looking just at our phone, if we're looking at a screen and fixated on one place. That's a very sympathetic driver versus looking out and allowing ourselves to use our panoramic peripheral view and looking at a sunset and just letting the system vibrate a little bit, or humming. I kid you not, if you're doing some mobility and you start humming, that's also an exhale, but also you get that vibration in your nasal palate, which has tons of parasympathetic nerve endings in it. And that's also a huge parasympathetic driver that also releases nitrogen oxide, which helps with our vessels and blood vessels to open up and get blood out to the system. So many different things that we can do to get into this parasympathetic system and downregulate.
Again, it's all the intention behind the breath work, right? It's not about a specific cool technique or anything like that, but we're really going to bring the intention of, can we open the system first to be able to create the breath that we want to create? And then how can we use that open system now to bring in the intention of the downregulation to help increase that mobility and relax the system? And so that's all of the stuff that we're kind of going to be programming in throughout the month, which I'm really excited for, especially as people step into holiday season and all the stress and love of that. I think it's going to be really impactful.
So number 2, moving on.
What we often neglect is this base of support underneath our pelvis, which holds so much pressure. If we're talking from the breath, every time we use that diaphragm, we're changing the pressure in the system that is impacting our pelvic floor. So if it doesn't have the ability to relax and lengthen, and it's always stressed and tight, well then we're changing our dynamics within our hip, within our breath, within our system. And I know I'm specifically going to go through this a little bit more in one of the live lectures that we go through in the Grateful for My Body Challenge. But when you look at the pelvic floor muscles and where they kind of fall into, they're going to start to come up and then into the glute rotators, the hip rotators. So there's such a close relationship between the glutes that we think of and our pelvic floor. And so if we're constantly tight in our glutes, we constantly feel like we have to roll them out, we constantly feel like we have to do pigeon pose and release that tightness, well, are we looking all the way down those glutes and into the pelvic floor? And that's where doing exercises and release techniques that are going to help to address the length and the mobility of our pelvic floor is directly going to play a role in your hips, in your rotation of your hips, and what you feel. And even, especially as a woman, you've been told to kind of not have a tummy, right? Have a flat stomach. I mean, that's at least what was ingrained in me when I was young and growing up, and what we were surrounded by in media and what we saw all the time. And this tightness in your stomach, it puts different pressures down into the pelvic floor. And sometimes if we hold our stomach tight all the time, well, then we're holding our pelvic floor tension tight all the time. And then we've been taught, just Kegel everything away. It's just so counterintuitive. So, I'm really excited to introduce pelvic release classes into the Grateful for My Body Challenge as well.
Point number 3.
Understanding the relationship between what it means to passively stretch and what it means to actively stretch. And I think this is a debate that a lot of people can see on social media, and it drives me nuts because I'm like, why are we fighting on people moving? The answer is yes. The answer is both. We want passive stretching. We want that ability to downregulate. We want that ability for the system to feel calm. And we want the ability to be able to move into these active ranges. And not only when we're down and doing mobility type exercises, but also when we're lifting. If I'm doing a hinge type movement or a squat type movement, that is mobility in action.
Again, like you mentioned at the beginning, a lot of people will just be sitting in poses and wanting to get into a certain position and just sitting there for minutes, 5 minutes or more. And I don't always want to make people think that we're trashing on yoga, because I do think yoga can have a lot of great active components.
Totally.
Where you're supporting in positions and you're
supporting,
you're moving through these extreme ranges of motions. And there is definitely a place for the passive portion of mobility, because when we hold a stretch or we hold a muscle length for a certain amount of time, that's what helps our brain. And a lot of these reflex patterns, like we've got these things in our tendons that if we stretch, at a certain rate, they want to protect, from sprain or from strain. But if we sit in a stretch for an extended amount of time, beyond 90 seconds to 2 minutes, those reflexes start to relax and then give us access to more range of motion. Great. Passive stretch worked. But that's where we then need to go to the active portion where, okay, now we have maybe a little more access to some more range. Now, how do we activate that muscle throughout that range to then show the muscle, okay, we can still be safe in this new range of motion that we've gotten? Because sometimes our body might freak out when we've been given extra range. And it's like, oh, I don't know what it means to support our body weight within this new range. So now I'm going to tighten back up.
If we start to neglect a crucial portion of mobility, and we're just like, no, I just strength train and I do it smart and I do it, and keep doing that. Like, don't stop doing that, right? Find your full range of your strength and keep doing it in a very smart way. But I will also say that the people I know who are older, and I'm saying, 65 plus, that are adding passive stretching into their life, this is anecdotal for me, but way more mobile in life than those who completely neglect it and are so gung-ho on only active mobility. I believe strongly that we need both, and knowing and starting to do it in a smart way can really help to benefit the body in a long term, to help you with lifting, to help you with everyday life, to help you not feel aches and pains. Our mobility is our baseline. If we were looking at like a food pyramid structure, but only it's movement, we need this full range of motion within our body before we start really strengthening on top of it, before we start building skill, before we start building all these other things. So we need that range. We need our body to feel safe. And we do that by adding in both the passive and active components to build in that safety within the system.
Sales open today. You can get in at a discounted price this week only. There's going to be a massive community moving through this challenge together all month for November. It's going to be a great way to get your body down regulated, get mobile, get feeling good. It's the Grateful for My Body, relax and recover, really to just give some love to your body on the holidays so that you can show up the best you possibly can for the people around you and for your family.
I'm so excited. Of course, I'm still going to be doing, strength training and my usual workouts, which I encourage other people to do, but this is a way to really tap back in to reset the body and recover. And I think that's often neglected when we're talking about healing and we're talking about pain, we're talking about moving forward, especially in a time when life gets more stressful. So I'm really, really excited. I'm so excited for the community that's going to move into this. And if you've been neglecting some of these things that we just mentioned, down regulation, breath work, pelvic floor, come join us. It's going to be fun. I hope that helped to inspire you to start these 3 things. Think about them in your day-to-day life and maybe hopefully become a little bit more mobile than Dr. Dom. Just kidding. He's doing great. But again, we're going to have it linked down below to join the Grateful for My Body Challenge. The discount is only happening right now, so get in now and then pass it along for anyone who can hold you accountable to continuing throughout the month of November with us.